Let's focus on simple and easy, and let's just try to remove the friction or the paper cuts. You can win over a customer in those little moments much more than those massive implementations.
Customer experience wisdom, a dash of travel talk. We've been cleared for takeoff.
The best meals are served outside and require a passport.
Welcome back to CX Passport. I am truly thrilled to introduce Lauren Feehrer, founder and president of LoyaltyCraft Consulting. Lauren is dedicated to helping mid-market companies grow through improved customer experiences. Why thrilled? Well, certainly because of what Lauren knows and the wisdom she can share about customer experience. And I have found someone who probably loves travel, especially outdoor travel, even more than me. I came aware of Lauren through a great newsletter series she created on LinkedIn recently, where she described a great trip with ample outdoor stories. Applying those stories to customer experience insights, Lauren's writing intrigued me. Several back and forth interactions in the comments later, and it was clear I had to have Lauren on CX Passport. Lauren works to examine the full range of the customer journey to identify and address challenges. With a career background in places like Accenture, Rareview, the Brink SBDC, and Alliance Global Services, she's got the business chops to know how experience influences tangible results. Inspired by her grandfather's dedication as a small business owner, Lauren founded LoyaltyCraft on the principles of trust and long-term relationships. So she not only preaches great experience to her clients, she delivers it. CX, relationships, travel, I'm all in. Lauren, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you, Rick. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be part of your longstanding, wonderful show. So look forward to our conversation today.
Well, thank you for the kind words. That's the way to put the host in a good mood. All right, I like that. Very good. In spite of the host being slightly jealous, for those that are watching, if you're not listening, you may want to look over at YouTube. Lauren is coming to us from a beautiful part in Colorado with a glorious sunny day. As we sit here recording on the 29th of July, I bet her weather today is going to be a lot better than my weather. It looks glorious there, Lauren.
I cannot complain about life at 11,000 feet. It is an adventure, and today's 70 and sunny, so I can't complain.
All right, episode over. I'm jealous. That's it. All the goodwill has now been lost. But you know what we better do? We better get back to talking about customer experience. But I want to talk about something that's actually similar between us. We both started our careers at Accenture, although I'm ancient enough to describe that my career actually started at Anderson Consulting.
Well, as did mine, luckily.
Yes,
so
we did find that out together after the fact.
Apparently.
We are kids of the 90s in our careers for sure. So how did you go from that classic system business analyst role to focusing on customer experience today?
Sure. Well, I was implementing software in the Fortune 500 and was a process analyst when I first started. So I was, creating these very, very structured, beautiful swim lane diagrams that showed everything working perfectly, right? Because it always does. Everything's perfect. And
in the land of Visio, sure.
Right? In the confines of Visio, sure. But in the real world, where customers interact with software, not always. Things like blue screens happen to us, and we don't necessarily plan for those, do we? And I think that's what I realized was life is messier than a flow chart. And when we think about the customer journeys, customers are coming to us through maybe the front door, but maybe a side window, and unfortunately leaving out the back too quickly. And so I kind of realized through working in software that my true passion was around how do we make this better for customers? And I love that Steve Jobs quote about let's start, from the customer and work our way backwards to the technology. That's what really got me inspired. I did have a CEO along the way who tapped me on the shoulder and said, we really need to listen to our customers better. Lauren, do you think you could just go visit all of them?
Oh, cool.
And that's what started me on my way with learning what voice of customer was and really getting started kind of understanding what customer experience is all about. And really, I'm thankful to him for helping launching my journey into this space, which is just so fun.
So you actually, literally started with the literal voice of the customer, going out there and talking to customers. Have you found that is the origins? Because there's many different origin stories of folks getting into CX.
Yeah.
Have you found that day zero of it was talking to customers has influenced you today in how you approach CX and how that blends with all of the other elements of making a customer experience something great?
Absolutely. And I remind my customers of that. Oftentimes, my clients have to go out and really listen. And that can be intimidating at first, but it's
Right.
amazing what people, will tell you when you just ask. And so finding the right way to ask, the right moments, that certainly has influenced the way that I practice our profession, is really listening and asking good questions and then sitting back for those quiet moments to give customers space to share exactly what's going on and what went right or what went wrong.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
You actually you started answering that with it. I can't remember the exact word, but like it's frightening or it can be scary to go out and do
Intimidating.
that.
Sure.
And intimidating. And so as you're working with clients, how do you get them comfortable with the fact that you're going to do this? It's going to be valuable. You're going to hear bad things. Don't freak out. What has that been like with your conversation with clients?
That's always fun is to say let's start. Sometimes they're so scared to do a journey map, and I'm a big proponent of a journey map is a customer journey map. It's not assumptive. It shouldn't be just what we make up and what we think a customer might feel. It's so powerful when we actually bring a customer into the room to share their story. And so I'll say, well, why don't we start with an employee and let's tell their onboarding experience of when they joined the company and like break the ice with that. And I'm like, see if they can do it. Maybe we can have a couple of customers come join us. And once they kind of, get a taste of that, then they're all in, because it's the nuggets in what they share that's so transformative for us. You don't get that if you're just crafting the happy path like I talked about before with the Visio diagrams. You're just not going to learn the things that you learn when you bring a customer into the room, or be able to play that recording, play that audio for a CEO, or even have the CEO in the room with the customer. I mean, those are all such powerful things that inspire change.
I'm a huge proponent of that. It is amazing to see both the foreheads that go into the palms or the smiles or the wide eyes that happen when you're bringing the literal customer's voice or their actual words into the room. You'd said something. There was a phrase when you and I were talking earlier that intrigued me, and it was Agile CX. I'd like you to tell me more about what do you mean by that, and then any stories about how Agile CX made a difference.
Sure. Well, and as we talked about my background, which is in software, I was in the period of time where companies were transitioning from a standard waterfall approach over to Agile and building Agile teams. And what I found was we were able to kind of knock down the idea of that there's this wall between business analysts and gathering requirements, what the customer has to say, and the developers who would actually build the software. And by breaking down that wall, it just allowed for design to happen more fluidly, for changes to happen, for us to be able to pivot quickly, and be much more collaborative and show customers, hey, is this what you want? What do you think of this? And so to me, that just didn't feel like it was only applicable to software. It's truly a way of working. And that's kind of how I brought it into CX for the clients that I work with and people around me. I find that a big goal is to break down the silos of organizations. And so if we can create Scrum teams, small teams that work together to solve customer pain points in an iterative way, that's incredibly powerful. And what I found is we can deliver that value much, much faster rather than just sitting on big backlogs of ideas or opportunities. A lot of companies, I think, just gather a lot of those ideas, but then it's really, really hard to get them implemented, especially in a short time period. And so that's what Agile CX is all about, is being able to work collaboratively, actually bring customers into the room and get their feedback on the things that we're doing, and then work across the organization to make that change happen.
To folks like you and me and anyone who's done, whether it's capital A Agile or just the concepts of lowercase a Agile, where it's just doing things in smaller chunks faster, it seems really intuitive. That's the way you would get to value faster, yet we don't see that. A lot of times we see in customer experience initiatives that it's got to be the something big, whether it's let's go buy a significant purchase in technology when it comes to experience management tool or some other grand experience initiative. Why do you think companies continue to lean more towards the grand rather than the quick iterative value approach?
I wish I knew the answer to that. Sometimes it's like, let's focus on simple and easy and the things that can cause, those moments of, let's just try to remove the friction or the paper cuts. Let's find those, because you can win over a customer in those little moments much more than sometimes those massive implementations. So, I think that we get focused and kind of wrapped around the axle on the big implementations, because they're hard and because they're going to take investment. And so they take time and they're going to take a lot of resources. So, the time's necessary. But sometimes if you can just pull together a small team and say, hey, let's go fix the fact that, we have this really outdated process we should kill. Let's figure out how to do that, and do it within a 2-week cycle. Those are when, you can build a lot of momentum with people when you get those wins.
You are definitely singing my song with that one. I love anything that is a quick win like that. Something that, as I've come to know you, you're in a space that is not one that I knew that you were in before. Back in May, I had put out a newsletter talking about the CX, the customer experience of grief. Having just lost my mother to Alzheimer's, it was really amazing, I'll use the word, but kind of shocking to see how difficult the actual business experience of someone's passing. It wasn't great. Not to mention the emotional grief, but the business itself is a struggle. And even prior to my mom's passing, the caregiver experience was a challenging one. This is where you've had an opportunity to really work in this area, the caregiver, the elder care, the end of life space. What have you learned about that experience, and and I'll just say it sort of collectively, how can we get better at this?
Well, thank you for the question. And first off, I'm sorry for your loss. Grief is tough. And we don't know. And I think the unknown is what's tough for all of us, is we don't know what to expect watching a loved one pass. It's a very scary, overwhelming experience. And, when I was working recently in the elder care space, actually studying hospice caregivers who had just lost a loved one, the thing that really came true out of that research was that people want to be able to communicate with each other about this and share. And they want to share the experience of making their loved one feel dignity and respect. And I think that shows up differently for people in different ways. But oftentimes for me, I know when I've lost my family members, it was about telling their story or what was true about them. There's a reason my grandfather's story is on my website, is because that's such a meaningful person to my life. And so in the hospice space, it is really about, I think, providing someone that space, and providing each other space to grieve, space to learn, and the people who actually are the nurses in that space and social workers. Man, they just have the biggest heart, so much empathy, and I'm so inspired by them. That is tough work. But the best way that they can support someone is letting them tell their story and be there to support along the way. And I think we can all do that for each other. It's pretty special.
That idea of telling the story, because that's exactly it. Especially, let's say that someone is not even able to tell their story, but as the relative, the caregiver, that element, then you can start to amplify the story. And even as caregivers or hospice or whatever, ask about that and understand that this is a sensitive area. And so how have you found the ability to get in there and understand it? Because you do have to kind of put whether it's Agile CX or kind of put your business lens on, right? And understand, how can we make this better when you're in a space that's so emotion-based? How are you getting the business right in this space along with getting the emotion right in this space?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really big challenge. And I do think it's a matter of, you have to prioritize so many things. I know with the research we just did, we came out with 80 different opportunities to improve the experience. And they're already doing great care. But, it's kind of taking those themes of the research and saying, all right, well, if a caregiver wants to make sure their loved one's story is told, what are some simple ways we could do that? And what can we implement tomorrow versus something that's going to take us more time? Or when we look at the resources, it's an overwhelming experience, and not one size doesn't fit all when it comes to, do I need video content, or do I need an app, or do I need a booklet, or do I need a website, right? Yeah. And so it's sorting through all of that in terms of, well, what's going to be the most valuable to, you take the 80-20 rule and say, what's going to be the most valuable for the largest amount of people that's going to have the biggest impact, and really weight those things against each other to kind of come out and say, all right, well, this maybe we can do quickly. This is the bigger thing, but this is going to have more impact. So it's so important to have kind of a roadmap for those opportunities, and again, put it into Agile and get them done.
I like that. See, I love you brought it. Like, we're talking about stories, we're talking about emotion, we're talking about a heart, and
Like, put
put into
and
Agile
rank
CX
it.
and get the stupid stuff done, right? So I love it. I absolutely love it.
Oh,
Hey,
yes.
major pivot here, but I talked about, how I came to know you was through your storytelling about road trips and outdoors. What is it about that grand road trip that captures your imagination? And specifically, how did this come about for your family? And come on, what was it really like?
Oh yeah, it's not all what Instagram shows, right? So certainly packing a family of four. I have two boys. They're now middle schoolers, so we're going through those really fun preteen years. But a few years back, we had a little thing called a pandemic,
Yeah.
and we didn't want to be locked inside. The trails and beaches in our community closed, which to me still blows my mind that you'd actually close a trail. And we were like, no,
Yeah.
we cannot do this. Like, we are outdoors people. We need to be outside. And why don't we explore the country? We don't have to physically be anywhere. Our school was closed. Our offices were closed. So we bought a camper. We had never even been in a camper before.
Oh, wow.
We had no
Okay.
experience with this at all. We had tent camp, but never actually, my husband had no idea how to drive a travel trailer. I mean, it was all new to us. But we did it. We bought it. And then a week later, got on the road and, traveled across the country doing national park tours. And, it was pretty quiet in those national parks during those days. So a very, very special experience. We spent a few months on the road doing that. And I'd say it really transformed our family in terms of how we communicate. When you're stuck in a 30-foot camper with four people and two dogs, it's, an adventure, but it has its challenges, its moments when you're right on top of each other and you realize you have to figure out how to work together and get through hard times. So, it certainly solidified our value as our family values in terms of adventure and curiosity, encouraged to do things that maybe not every family would do. So that's the reality of it.
Lauren, there's just something so wonderfully, I'll use the word romantic, but not necessarily in like the love sense, but just kind of the sort of epic novel romantic vision of a road trip that just, especially there's something maybe about the American road trip too. Maybe it's just the variety, the size, that I'm not sure what it is, but that road trip. And then, my gosh, getting into a camper that you've never done it before and learning how to drive and all the things that you learned as a family. I will, folks, Lauren's LinkedIn profile is going to be in the show notes. Make sure you go back and look at some of those old articles, because the insight as how it's tied to customer experience or business or life in general were incredibly valuable. Now, Lauren, I got to imagine that there were times, though, as delightful as it was and exploratory as it was as a family to get to know each other, there was probably a little secret thought that you said, I kind of miss the airport lounges. I kind of miss having a break. I kind of miss the first class lounge. So today, we're going to give you a little access to the first class lounge here on CX Passport. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
There's so many, and Rick, I know you're a big traveler and it kind of depends on the moment.
Sure.
I grew up by the ocean. And so, anytime I can get to the water, I'm a pretty happy person. My family has spent some time in Grand Cayman, and I witnessed two of my friends fall in love there. So
Aww.
That is an incredibly special place for me to go to Grand Cayman and get to hang out with some stingrays on an island in the Caribbean.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes. I have an aunt and uncle that have lived there for 30 some odd years. So I love the Caymans. What a brilliant place I think you may be the first to mention the Caymans. Oh, it's beautiful. Yes.
And it's great for families. It's kind of my
Yes.
favorite Caribbean island when it comes to just having a lot to do, and 7 Mile Beach with that beautiful turquoise water. It's pretty nice.
Hi, you realize that after this show, I'm going to go to Google Flights and just see what would it mean to get to the Caymans as quickly as possible. What going forward? What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Okay, so and I am a surfer, so of course
Oh,
I'm watching the
cool.
Olympics right now and watching
Yeah.
the surfers compete in French Polynesia, and so yeah, Tahiti is definitely on my list. I've never been there, and it's definitely staying on one of those special hotel rooms above the water sounds pretty cool.
Oh man. Oh, I like that. And yeah, it's been kind of fun. Yeah, I could imagine that the athletes may kind of feel, oh man, I'm not in the epicenter of it. But when you're told you won't be in the epicenter of the Olympics, but you're going to be in Tahiti, I feel like some of that disappointment went by the wayside pretty darn quickly.
Oh
Like, all
yeah.
right, I'll be in Tahiti,
Yeah,
no
as a
problem.
surfer, I mean, I grew up looking at Surfer magazine and pictures of Teopu, and that is an epic, epic place.
It
The
looks.
break they're in is called the Wall of Skulls. So that is not a wave for the everyday surfer. It's just one I'd love to see someday.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I've now learned about the Wall of Skulls. And,
There you go.
where am I going to learn to surf? Not there.
Not there. Oh no, 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 no. No,
Lauren,
that's
what is a
why the
favorite?
Olympians go there.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Lauren, what is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
Because I grew up on the water, I am a huge seafood fan. So get me
Nice.
to Rhode Island, where I grew up in the summer, eating any kind of seafood at all, and I am a happy camper.
Oh, that sounds delightful. It absolutely does. Well, okay. Growing up, what was something that you were forced to eat but you hated as a kid?
Oh, I have a tough relationship with beets.
Oh,
I was forced to eat beets, and I sat there for over 3 hours just refusing to eat them. It was a standoff with my parents. I thought they looked like tendons, and they just grossed me out so much I couldn't do it. So I like cried in my plate for 3 hours straight until finally my parents gave up. And then my mom, I think, was more traumatized than I was because then she just refused to feed me anything new. I think I just ate pasta and butter for like years
oh.
afterwards.
Well, boy, if you're going to do a holdout,
Oh,
one, I agree with you on beets. I'll hold out on beets as well. But it looks like you kind of won that labor holdout that you're ending up with pasta and butter going forward. Fine by me.
well, the sad part, I didn't get a lot of variety. It took me till, I was in my 20s and started traveling and experiencing food from all over the world. I'm thankful for that. And also, I'm sorry to my mother who was forced to give me some pretty plain food for many years.
Oh, I love how this that question does tend to expose some moments for therapy sessions of the future. I would imagine, Lauren. It's time for us to exit the lounge. What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
Well, aside from my retainer, which, I like to keep my teeth straight. So that's like a given. I have a 5-year travel journal. Or it's just a journal, but
Huh.
every day I write a sentence. So it's not, I'm not writing lots and lots of prose. I'm literally writing one sentence a day, and it keeps 5 years going. So it's fun to look back from like, what was I doing 3 years ago on the same date? So that's always in my bag wherever I go.
Lauren, I don't want to say anything about other guests, but you're definitely in kind of the on the medal stand for sure with answers to that question. Wow. First of all, you make me laugh about the retainer, of course. Ha, that's awesome. But I bet that travel journal is fascinating. That's the kind of thing that would be really interesting to see, all those sentences and the evolution of not only the trips you took, but the evolution of you as a person, the family, the experience that you have. Ooh, that's fun. Ooh,
Yeah, that was fun. Someone shared that with me on a trip once that they had this 5-year journal. I went to Amazon right away and picked one up, and
wow, that's awesome.
it's just neat to see, to see how the past can influence your future.
Well, that's okay. So that actually goes to a question that I wanted to ask you about, because to do so requires discipline, a process, and execution. You have to, one, have the journal. You have to actually write in the journal. You have to choose to do that. So you know that, and others, the listeners and viewers certainly know, I talk a ton about process and execution. It's, to me, it's this required path of how we're going to get CX out of the wilderness that it's in right now. It's the way to deliver tangible business value. Why do you think that there are so many in the experience world that have de-emphasized process and execution in the recent past? And what should we be doing to bring it back?
Rick, I could not agree with you more. And it's
Woo-hoo.
something that I know that we geek out about together
Yes.
on the importance of process and discipline to actually implement change. it's hard work, and I think people shy away from it because there's, a lot of shiny object syndrome. It's a lot more fun to talk about AI and machine learning and all the cool stuff, all the cool gadgets, versus sticking to, kind of the habits and the rituals that go with, all right, we're on a plan here, and here are the things to consider in terms of, is this going to be additive to our customers' experience? Is this going to save us time and money? Really putting, I think, the flywheel that has to stay in place requires that precision of always saying, what does this get us at the end of the day? And
Right.
if we don't wear that lens, you're right. Like, you're actually not going to get the ROI out of CX that was so needed right now. I'll try not to break into Justin Timberlake here and bring sexy back, but I do think like we need a little focus on, actually a lot of focus on, how do we make sure that we're actually driving this value, and doing it by saying, all right, not only do we understand the journey map of a customer, but what's the service blueprint that's happening underneath it, and what are we putting our employees through? So if we put our customer through a bad time, guess what? Like, the employee's probably not doing great either. So let's actually bring teams cross-functionally together to map out, like, well, what does that process look like? What are the tools they're using and struggling with? What are their emotions as they go through, that customer journey? You can learn a lot through that, and I feel like there should be more emphasis on it.
That emotional aspect of that is something that I'm coming a little more aware of. The employee experience of how the internal emotions are really driving the behavior. And I'm seeing a lot of interest in some interesting white papers coming out and some studies around that are interesting around that kind of just the internal emotion aspect of it, coupled with the just discipline and execution aspect of it. I wonder if, I don't actually know where this is going, but the story of your grandfather and how that inspired LoyaltyCraft. I don't know if that has anything to do with process execution or if there was inspiration from there or anything along those lines, but I'd like to know that story because I only know the headline. I don't actually know the story in really great depth. Why is it that his experience, his approach is what inspired you to take LoyaltyCraft forward?
Sure. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut. Is an old mill town where the mill was out of business. And so, times were tough in that area. He owns the automotive shop in town, right in the heart of town across from Dairy Queen. And it was just a block away from my school. And so as an elementary school student, I would stop by the shop, and my father and my uncle and, grandfather, even an aunt worked she was the bookkeeper. They're all there. And so I'd stop in. They had this really cool soda machine. So I would go get a cherry soda and then walk around. And, I got to really be a firsthand observer in a small town business. And one thing my grandfather would do, and I didn't know this until he passed. And so I was looking at, we had like an online page for his obituary, and people from town were commenting about the power of my grandfather and his business. And one woman wrote about how my grandfather would always test drive the car when it was fixed, would always take it for a drive around town to make sure it was performing exactly as it should, and would be the person to hand back the keys to the owner of that vehicle. And to me, that was the promise of his company, and kind of the feeling that I wanted to have for the companies I work with is like, hey, you have to feel that, the families that would have their car fixed at Ideal Tire were families that we cared about. And, it was that emotion, that connection to people that he inspired in me.
I like that. There's a beauty to that, of course. And then there's the practicality of that. I like the blend of the beauty and the practicality of that, of how the emotion of the family can then be taken forward into the practical nature of your business. Family is a recurring theme for you. And I'd like to close out with something that I found really fun when you and I were talking earlier. You had told me that your family operates in the Agile model. So not just Agile CX for your customers, but you've got your family operating in the Agile model.
We're all big dorks.
Well, tell me beyond just being big dorks, which I don't quite necessarily buy into, but how did this come about? What's it like in a family that is approaching the Agile model?
So I had seen, I can't claim ownership of the idea. I saw a TED Talk on using Agile in families many years ago, and I liked it. I kind of tucked it in aside for once my kids got old enough to write their own personal user stories. So once they turn 6, once my youngest
I almost
turned
want to
6,
freeze on that sentence. Wait, personal users. Okay. Now let's keep going. All
right,
right. That's
right.
awesome.
So once we did that, we kind of recognized, and I always think, a family is a team.
Mhm.
And so, you want your team being able to collaborate and work together and have goals and accomplish them and feel this sense of pride in what we do. And so, it's tough these days with all the activities and sports and school and work and all the things, right? Sometimes you miss that. We didn't want to. So that was our why behind why Agile,
Okay.
was to allow us to kind of say, hey, let's get a chance to actually communicate with each other more effectively, be more collaborative, and get some really cool things done. So this is not, some people ask me when I talk about Agile in family, if it's like a chore chart. I'm like, oh goodness, no, we have fun. I hate chore charts. I never want a chore chart. But no, we write user stories. We each write individual ones. We each have a different color-coded sticky note. And we write things like, I want to learn how to speak Spanish so that we can travel to a Spanish-speaking country. Okay. So then it's a question of, well, do we all want to do that? Or is that just you, Jesse? And so we put it into our family backlog, and then we have to prioritize. So it's teaching my kids at a very young age that you can't do all the things. And so we run in 2 to 3 week cycles. We kind of vary it depending on what's going on in our lives. But then we really try to tackle these goals that we have, both personally and as a group. And that's kind of what pushed us to do a lot of the traveling that we've done, as well as just big steps that we want to take in our lives. We've been able to put on our Scrum board and make them happen. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent. Often it's easier to talk to clients who've never done Agile before to say, hey, my 6-year-old does this, like you can too. So it makes Agile a lot more accessible for everyone.
I like that. A little bit of
in that
shame
context.
there. Yeah, if my 6-year-old can handle this, I think you can put a sticky on a board. Ooh, I like that. Lauren,
Yeah.
I'm glad we ended with that, because I definitely want to end with that. What a brilliant way of operating inside of a family. My kids are empty nesters. We've lost any sort of chance to influence that way, but perhaps there could be others that are before the empty nest phase that
I
can
hope
benefit
so.
from
And feel
that.
free to reach out with me if you've got questions on how to implement it in reality and some of the fun you can have with a retrospective too.
Yeah. Well, so how can folks, if they want to get to know more about you, LoyaltyCraft, Agile CX, or how to run a family inside of Agile, what's the best way for them to learn more?
Sure. I'm always on LinkedIn, so feel free to hit me up there. That's a great way to connect. You can also reach me at lauren@loyaltycraft.com, and definitely check out my website. Love to connect. I love talking to other CX practitioners as well as companies trying to transform their experience. So look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. All of that will be in the show notes. Listeners, viewers, you know the drill. They're down there. Can't stress enough how Lauren is such a fantastic follow. Make sure you are paying attention to what she's putting out there on LinkedIn. Some great storytelling and some great lessons along the way. Just like this episode where I had a blast learning from you today, Lauren. I thought I knew, a good amount of you, and nope. I've learned a lot in not just customer experience, but road travel, camper life, and how one could run a family inside of an Agile model. What a brilliant approach to that. Lauren, it's been a treat talking with you today. Thank you for being on CX Passport.
Appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.